My name is Elena Brooks, and I'm 27 years old.
For a long time, I thought betrayal had to look dramatic to count. I thought it had to come with lipstick on a collar, a strange text at midnight, some obvious crack in the glass that anyone could point to and say, "There, that's where it broke." I didn't know someone could wound you just as deeply by sitting across from you in your favorite restaurant, speaking in a calm voice, and explaining that they still wanted you in their future. They just wanted to shop around first. That was what Ethan Carter did to me. We had been together for 3 years. 3 full years of shared routines, private jokes, hard seasons, and the kind of history that makes you stop saying my plans and start saying our plans without even noticing. We met at a friend's game night when I was 24 and he was 22. He was funny in a loose, effortless way, the kind of man who could make a room feel lighter just by walking into it. He was smart, charming, and reckless in small doses, the kind of reckless that felt youthful when I first met him and only later revealed itself as selfishness wearing a grin. Back then, I loved how alive he seemed. When he focused on me, it was intoxicating. He listened closely. He remembered strange little details. He could turn even an ordinary grocery run into something warm and flirtatious. When we started dating, people used to say we looked easy together, like we had skipped past the awkwardness most couples take months to grow through. I believed that too. I thought we had found something rare simply because it had begun without friction. But relationships aren't measured by how beautifully they begin. They're measured by what survives pressure. And ours had survived quite a bit. We made it through his last stretch of school. We made it through my job relocation panic, when I thought my hours were going to swallow me whole. We even survived 6 months of long distance when he took an internship 2 states away. I remember nights sitting on my bed with my laptop open, his face freezing mid-laugh because the connection glitched, both of us pretending that missing each other was romantic instead of exhausting. I mailed him snacks, socks, and handwritten notes. He sent me photos of bad takeout, hotel coffee, and random sunsets with captions like, "Can't wait till I'm home and boring with you again." I held on to those things. When he came back, it felt like proof. Proof that we had chosen each other through inconvenience. Proof that we were serious. Proof that we were becoming something solid. So when we started talking about moving in together, it didn't feel rushed. It felt earned. We weren't floating around in fantasy. We were comparing rent prices and commute times. We were sending each other screenshots of sectionals and arguing about whether we really needed a dining table right away. He said he wanted the place to feel like ours from the first day, not like he was moving into my life or I was moving into his. I believed him. 3 weeks before everything fell apart, I put down a deposit on an apartment. I can still see it if I let myself. The empty living room with late afternoon light spread across the floor, the leasing agent's voice fading into the background while I imagined where the couch would go, where we'd stack our books, where Ethan would probably leave his shoes no matter how many times I asked him not to. It wasn't a fantasy about marriage and babies and matching holiday pajamas. It was smaller than that, quieter, better. It was a life beginning to settle into place. I walked out of that building thinking I was standing at the edge of the next chapter. He was already planning his exit. The conversation happened on a Thursday night at the taco place we always went to. The waiter knew our order. The salsa was too spicy for Ethan and never spicy enough for me. I had my phone out because we'd been looking at furniture, sending each other pictures of chairs neither of us could actually afford. He'd been quiet for a few minutes, and at first I thought he was tired. Then I noticed the way he kept turning his water glass in small circles. I looked up. "What?" He gave me a quick smile. "Nothing." That answer dropped straight into my stomach. No one says nothing like that unless it's definitely something. He exhaled and put his fork down. I remember that part with terrible clarity, the little click of metal against ceramic, laughter from another table behind me, the way the overhead lights suddenly felt too warm. He didn't reach for me, didn't soften it. He just looked at the table for a second and said, "Elena, we need to talk." My chest tightened. "Okay," I said. He rubbed the back of his neck. "I've been thinking a lot lately." I didn't help him. I didn't fill the silence for him. I just waited. Then he said, "I'm only 25. I went still. Not because 25 sounded young, because I knew instantly he was about to use youth as a weapon and call it honesty. "I've only really been with 3 women, he said, "including you. And I don't know. Lately I've been feeling like maybe I'm missing out on experiences." For a second, the whole restaurant blurred at the edges. "Experiences," I repeated. He gave this awkward half shrug, like if he looked uncomfortable enough, I might do the emotional labor of making his selfishness sound noble. I'm too young to be tied down. Tied down. That was the phrase he chose. Not loved, not committed, not building a life. Tied down. I stared at him long enough that he shifted in his seat. We're talking about moving in together, I said finally. Not walking into a church tomorrow. But that's where this goes, right? He said quickly. Move in, engagement, marriage, kids eventually, that whole path, and He looked away, then back at me. I need to explore my options a little, see what else is out there. There are moments in life when pain arrives slowly. That wasn't one of them. That landed all at once. I set my phone face down on the table. So you want to break up so you can date other people? He winced like I was being harsh. That sounds worse than what I mean. I let out one small laugh. Ethan, that is what you mean. He reached for my hand. I pulled mine back before he could touch it. And that was the first flicker of irritation I saw on his face. Not remorse, not shame. Irritation. Like I was disrupting the version of this conversation where I cried, he looked torn, and somehow still got to keep my affection in storage while he wandered off to find himself.
We can still be close, he said. We can stay friends. And who knows, maybe after I've had some time and figured things out, we could find our way back to each other.
I just looked at him. He mistook silence for openness, so he kept going. You're everything someone would want long-term, he said. You're stable, you're loyal, you're... Convenient? I asked. His mouth closed. That's not what I meant. No, I said. It's just what it sounds like. He leaned back, defensive now. I'm trying to be honest. Honest would have been saying you don't want this anymore. I kept my voice level. What you're actually saying is that you do want this. You just don't want it enough to stop wondering whether there's something more exciting out there. So you want to go see. And you expect me to what? Stay emotionally parked until you're done? He let out a short breath through his nose. You're making this uglier than it is. No, I'm making it exact. He gave me this disbelieving little laugh, almost affectionate, like I was being dramatic in a way he found manageable. People take breaks all the time, Elena. This isn't a break. He shook his head. You're upset now, but you'll understand eventually. We've had 3 years together. That doesn't just disappear. We're meant to end up together. I just need some freedom before that. That sentence changed everything. Because that was the truth sitting right there between the chips and salsa and furniture screenshots. He thought I was the ending. The safe one. The woman who would still be there after he sampled enough temporary thrills to feel ready for permanence. He wasn't risking me in his mind. He was postponing me, and he truly believed I would wait. I stood up. His expression shifted instantly. Surprise first, then confusion, then the faintest trace of alarm. I took cash from my wallet and dropped it on the table for my half of dinner. Explore away, Ethan. Elena, come on. I really hope, I said, you find exactly what you're looking for. Then I walked out. He called twice before I reached my car. I declined both calls. By the time I got home, there was already a text waiting for me. You're overreacting. Let's talk tomorrow when you've calmed down. I stared at the screen for a long moment. Even then, after saying he wanted to leave our relationship to sleep with other women and maybe circle back later, he still thought this would move on his timeline, his explanation, his reset button, his decision about when I was allowed to be hurt and when I should be reasonable again. I didn't answer. Instead, I called the apartment leasing office. The woman who picked up sounded apologetic when she explained that because I'd already put money down and Ethan hadn't signed yet, I would lose $500 if I backed out now. I told her I understood. My throat tightened, but my voice didn't crack until after I hung up. $500 felt enormous that night. Later, it would feel laughably cheap. Then I blocked him. Phone, Instagram, Facebook, every place he might try to slide back into if freedom got lonely, faster than he expected. I didn't post anything passive-aggressive. I didn't make a scene. I didn't send one last speech about how he'd regret this. I just removed access. He wanted options. He no longer got to include me among them. That first night was ugly in the way real heartbreak always is. I sat on the floor of my apartment, still wearing my coat, my bag tipped over beside me, keys near my knee, and cried until my ribs hurt. Not delicate crying, not cinematic crying, the kind that leaves your face hot and swollen and makes you feel briefly humiliated by your own hope. I wasn't just grieving him, I was grieving the version of the future I had already started arranging in my mind. The apartment, the routines, the ordinary intimacy of a life that had almost become real. But beneath the grief, something colder was forming, not bitterness. Clarity. Because heartbreak is survivable. Humiliation is something else.
And if I had agreed to what he was really asking for, if I had smiled through it and stayed emotionally available while he explored, if I had allowed myself to become a woman waiting politely on a shelf while a man tested other lives, I would have done something worse than lose him. I would have betrayed myself. So I didn't. The next morning, I got up with swollen eyes, made coffee I barely touched, and went to work anyway. I answered emails, sat through meetings, smiled when I had to. No dramatic collapse, no late-night paragraph asking how he could do this, no begging. Just silence. And somewhere in the middle of that day, I realized something he never saw coming. He had mistaken my love for availability. That was his first mistake. It wouldn't be his last. The first week after I blocked him was quiet. Too quiet. It felt like the kind of silence that comes right after something breaks, when the dust hasn't settled yet, but nothing is moving either. I went to work, I came home, I avoided the taco place, I stopped opening the Notes app where I used to draft grocery lists for 2 people. And for a few days, it almost felt clean, like I had cut something out of my life before it could rot. Then the messages started. Not from him, from everyone else. It began with Ryan, his best friend. Hey, Elena, just checking in. Ethan said things got a little intense the other night. You guys okay? I stared at the message longer than I should have. A little intense. That's how he told the story. Not I told my girlfriend I wanted to sleep with other women and keep her as a backup plan. Just things got intense. I didn't reply. Then his sister texted me. He's really upset. I think he just needs space. You know how he gets. Space. The word almost made me laugh. He had all the space he asked for. What he didn't have anymore was me waiting at the edge of it. I muted the conversation. By the end of the week, there were 5 more messages. Mutual friends, casual acquaintances, people who didn't know enough to stay out of it, but felt entitled to comment anyway. He didn't mean it like that. You guys are good together. 3 years is a lot to throw away over a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding. That word sat wrong in my chest. Because there had been no confusion. He had been very clear. He just hadn't expected me to be. 2 weeks later, I saw him again. Not directly, through a screen. Someone tagged him in the story. Loud music, dim lighting, a group of people crowded into a bar. Ethan was in the middle of it, drink in hand, arms slung casually around a girl I didn't recognize. He was smiling, not the soft smile he used to give me. A brighter one, looser, careless. The caption read, "Freedom looks good on you, man." I didn't feel jealous. That surprised me. What I felt instead was distance, like I was watching someone I used to know from the other side of a window. Like the version of him I loved had already ended, and this was just whatever came after. I closed the app. And that night, for the first time since the breakup, I slept without waking up in the middle of it. A month passed. Then another. Life didn't magically become easy, but it became manageable. I started running again in the mornings, even though I hated it at first. I stayed later at work, not to avoid going home, but because I actually had the energy to focus again. I signed up for a weekend class I'd been putting off for over a year. Little things, small, quiet shifts, but they added up. And slowly, almost without noticing it, my life stopped revolving around the absence he left behind. It started belonging to me again. The first time I saw him in person, it didn't feel like fate. It felt like calculation. I was at a coffee shop near my office, one I had only started going to after the breakup. New routine, new space, no shared memories attached. I had just picked up my drink when I heard my name. Elena? I turned, and there he was, Ethan. For a second, my body reacted before my mind did. That old recognition, that instinct to soften, to step closer, to smile. Then it passed. He looked mostly the same, maybe a little more tired around the eyes, maybe a little less certain in the way he held himself, but still undeniably him. "Hey," he said, like we had run into each other by accident. "Wow, I didn't expect to see you here." I held his gaze. Neither did I. But something about the timing felt too precise, too convenient. "You've been coming here long?" he asked. "A few weeks." He nodded, filing that away. Of course he was. "Oh, nice. Yeah, I just started stopping by sometimes." I almost smiled, because it wasn't true. He had never liked this part of the city, had complained about parking every time we came anywhere near it. The odds of him randomly discovering this exact coffee shop at this exact time after 2 months of silence? Too small. This wasn't coincidence. This was him circling back. "How have you been?" he asked. There it was. The question that sounds polite but is really a test. Are you still mine in some invisible way? I took a sip of my coffee. "I've been good." He blinked. Not because of the answer. Because of how easily it came out. "That's good," he said. He hesitated. "I've been thinking about you."
Of course you have. Not when you had options. Now.
I hope you've been finding what you were looking for, I said.
He winced slightly.
Yeah, I mean,
He ran a hand through his hair. It's not really like that.
but it was exactly like that.
And we both knew it.
He shifted his weight, then took a small step closer.
Can we talk? He asked.
Like, properly, not just this.
I looked at him. Really looked at him.
At the man who had sat across from me 2 months earlier and calmly explained that I was something he could come back to later. At the man who had walked away thinking I would still be there when he decided he was done experimenting.
No, I said.
The word landed between us, simple and final.
He frowned slightly, like he hadn't heard it correctly.
No?
No. Elena, come on, it's just a conversation.
We already had one.
That's not fair.
I tilted my head. Isn't it?
He exhaled, frustration starting to bleed through the charm. You're acting like I did something unforgivable. I didn't raise my voice. Didn't react. Just held eye contact. You didn't, I said. You made a decision.
And so did I.
That stopped him.
For the first time since he walked in, he didn't have a quick response ready,
Because that wasn't how this was supposed to go. In his version of the story, I was supposed to still be emotional, still processing, still reachable, not resolved. I miss you, he said finally. There it was. Not I was wrong. Not I hurt you. Just, I miss you. I nodded once. I don't. That one hit. I saw it. A flicker. Fast but real. Because missing someone is safe. It doesn't require accountability. It just centers the person feeling it. I think you're saying that because you're still hurt, he said quietly. No, I replied. I'm saying it because I'm not. Silence stretched between us. People moved around us. Orders were called. Cups clinked.
But in that moment, everything narrowed to the space between his expectation and my refusal to meet it.
He swallowed. So that's it? He asked.
That's it?
He stared at me for a long second.
Then, softer, almost disbelieving.
You're really just done.
I held his gaze.
Yes.
Something in his expression shifted then.
Not acceptance. Something sharper.
Like he had just realized for the first time that this wasn't temporary.
That I had actually left.
And that was the moment the dynamic changed. Because up until then, he thought he was the one who walked away. Now he understood. He wasn't the one who ended it.
I was.
And he hadn't been ready for that.
After that, I expected him to disappear again.
That would have been the normal thing.
The mature thing. The thing a person does when they realize they no longer have the right to access someone they hurt.
But Ethan had never been especially good at accepting closed doors. That evening, he texted me from a number I didn't know.
I miss you. Can we please just talk?
I stared at the message for a long moment, then blocked that number too.
The next morning, there was an email in my inbox. Subject line, I think we owe it to each other.
I didn't open it.
I deleted it.
Then, for 2 days, nothing. By the third day, I started to understand something I hadn't fully named before. Ethan had not come to that coffee shop hoping for closure. He had come for reassurance. He wanted proof that I was still emotionally available, still affected in a way he could use, still within reach if he decided he wanted me back.
And I had given him none of that, so now he was escalating.
It started small enough that any outsider could have called it persistence instead of disrespect.
A bouquet at the front desk of my office with no note, just my name written in black marker on the paper sleeve.
A voicemail from another unknown number. A message request on Instagram from an empty account with no photo and no followers. At first glance, none of it looked dangerous. Just messy. Annoying. The kind of thing people excuse because it arrives wrapped in flowers instead of fists. But what bothered me wasn't the gestures themselves. It was what sat underneath them. Refusal. I had said no. Clearly, more than once. And he was still acting like the situation remained open because he wanted it to.
That was when my discomfort became something colder, more alert.
I stopped throwing things away.
I took screenshots, saved emails, logged dates. Not because I was panicking, because I was paying attention. The first time he came to my building, it was raining. I had just stepped out of the elevator into the lobby when I saw him through the glass doors, half sheltered under the awning, hair damp at the temples, hands shoved into his coat pockets like he was starring in a scene he'd already rehearsed in his head. For one stupid second, my body remembered him before my brain caught up. The shape of him, the familiarity, the old reflex that says, there you are. Then my stomach dropped. Because Ethan had never been to this apartment. Not once. After the breakup, I'd walked away from the old lease entirely. Lost the deposit, found a smaller place closer to work. I had not given him the address. None of our mutual friends had been invited over. As far as I knew, there was no clean, innocent route that led him here. He saw me and straightened immediately, relief flashing across his face like he'd been waiting longer than he expected.
Elena. I stopped several feet away. The doorman glanced between us, sensing tension without needing details. How did you find me? I asked. He opened his mouth, then closed it again. That told me enough. It's not like that, he said. I almost laughed. Men say that when it is exactly like that. How did you find me? He shifted. I asked around. Around where? It doesn't matter. It mattered enormously. Because if he had asked mutual friends, then someone I knew had handed him access to me without my consent. And if he hadn't asked, if he had followed me, or waited outside my office, or pieced it together some other way, that was worse. You need to leave, I said. He looked stunned, as if showing up at my home uninvited in the rain was somehow romantic enough to cancel out the violation itself. I just wanted to talk. You came to my apartment. I didn't know what else to do. That landed badly. Because it wasn't true. He could have done what every adult on Earth does when someone doesn't want contact. He could have stopped. Instead, he had chosen the version of reality where his need to be heard outranked my right to feel safe. I'm not doing this here, I said. Elena, please. No. He stepped forward. Not aggressively, not enough that anyone watching would call it threatening. Just enough to force me to take half a step back. And that was all it took. The doorman moved then, smooth and immediate, positioning himself between us with the calm authority of someone who had intervened in situations like this before. Sir, he said, polite but firm, you need to leave. Ethan held up his hands. I'm not causing a problem. You are now, I said. He looked at me like I had slapped him. That expression would have hurt me once. Now it only made me tired. He tried one more time. I made a mistake, Elena. I looked at him across the doorman's shoulder. No, I said, you made a choice. And then I walked to the elevator without looking back. My hands started shaking only after the doors closed. Upstairs, I locked my apartment, leaned against the kitchen counter, and stood very still while the adrenaline moved through me in slow, ugly waves. I wanted to believe that would be enough. That humiliation would finally reach him where words hadn't. It wasn't. The next call came from his mother. I almost didn't answer because I didn't recognize the number, but I was expecting a delivery and picked up without thinking. Elena? Her voice was soft in that careful way people use when they already believe they're the reasonable one. This is Diane, Ethan's mother. I closed my eyes for 1 second. Of course. Hi, I said flatly. I hope I'm not catching you at a bad time. You are. A small pause. Then she continued anyway. I just think there's been a misunderstanding and I wanted to speak woman to woman. That phrase alone nearly ended the call. But I stayed quiet because I wanted to hear how far she would go. He's devastated, she said. I've never seen him like this. I looked at the rain sliding down my kitchen window and felt something in me go completely still. Devastated. Interesting word. Not ashamed, not accountable, devastated. I'm not sure what that has to do with me, I said. He knows he handled things badly. He handled them exactly how he wanted to. She gave a tight little sigh, like I was being difficult on purpose. He's young, Elena. There it was. The excuse dressed up as context. He's 25, I said, not 15. You know what I mean. I do, I said. That's the problem. She shifted tactics. You two had something real. People don't just throw that away because one person gets scared. I let the silence stretch long enough to force her to sit inside her own sentence. Then I said, he did. He made a mistake. No, I said quietly. He made a choice. And now he doesn't like what it cost him. Her tone cooled. You're being very hard. I laughed once. Not because anything was funny. Because sometimes contempt comes out sounding too calm. Your son told me he wanted to date other women and keep me around in case he changed his mind later. Then he showed up at my home uninvited. So with respect, Diane, I'm not the one being hard. Another pause, sharper this time. I think you're overreacting. The word hit me so cleanly I nearly admired it. Of course, that was the family language. Of course, it was easier to call me dramatic than to admit the men they raised believed access was theirs by default. I'm going to save you some time, I said. Don't call me again. Elena. I hung up. Then I blocked her too. That night I barely slept. Not because I missed him. Because the perimeter of my life had started feeling unstable. It is exhausting in a very specific way to realize someone no longer belongs in your world but has not accepted removal. Every sound outside the building becomes a question. Every unknown number becomes a possibility. Every ordinary routine starts to feel briefly visible, like maybe you've been watched in ways you can't prove. Still, I told myself I could manage it. I was careful. I was documenting things. I was not alone. Nothing had happened that a court would call extreme. But what courts call extreme and what women feel in their bones are often two very different timelines. A week later, I left work just after 6 and found him standing across the street from my office. He wasn't leaning on anything this time. wasn't pretending coincidence. He was just there, hands in his pockets, eyes locked on the building entrance like I had become a train schedule he intended to memorize. I stopped so abruptly that the woman behind me nearly walked into my shoulder.
He saw me and crossed immediately.
Elena, please don't walk away. I stayed where I was. People were everywhere. Traffic, footsteps, a man talking too loudly into a headset, the kind of public noise that should make a person feel safer than they do.
What are you doing here? I asked. I need 5 minutes.
No.
He looked exhausted now, frayed in a way he probably mistook for sincerity.
I know you think I don't understand what I did.
You don't. I do, he insisted. I freaked out. I sabotaged something good. I get that now. I stared at him.
And part of me, the older part, the softer part that once loved him hard enough to build a future around his shape, wanted to hear those words and let them mean something.
But remorse without respect is just another performance. You showed up at my apartment, I said. You had your mother call me. You are now waiting outside my office. So, no, Ethan, I don't think you get it.
His jaw tightened.
I'm trying to fix it.
You don't get to.
That seemed to anger him more than anything else I'd said so far. Not because it was cruel, because it removed his role. It told him this was no longer a story in which he could still act, still persuade, still choose the ending. You're acting like I cheated on you for years, he said. Like I abused you. I made one bad decision. There it was again. The minimization, the narrowing, the plea to be judged only by the version of events that made him easiest to forgive. I kept my voice low.
You didn't just leave. You told me I was your backup plan. Then when I refused to play that role, you started showing up where I live and work. Do not stand here and tell me this is one bad decision.
His face changed then. Not guilt, resentment. Because underneath the apologies, underneath the flowers and the tired eyes and the quiet voice, he still believed I was making this harder than necessary. He still believed I owed him a softer response than the one he earned. I loved you, he said, like that settled something. I know, I replied, and you still treated me like I'd be there whenever you came back. He looked at me in stunned silence. Because that was it. The thing he had been trying not to hear in plain language. I wasn't upset because he had doubts.
I was done because of the entitlement underneath them.
He lowered his voice. I thought we had more than this.
We did, I said, and you traded it in for curiosity. For the first time, he had no line ready.
Traffic moved behind him. Someone laughed at the corner.
A bus exhaled at the curb. And there we were, standing in the middle of a perfectly ordinary evening while something final hardened between us. He stepped toward me again, more desperate now than careful.
I can fix this.
No, you can't.
Yes, I can. The certainty in his tone chilled me more than the desperation had. Because he wasn't asking anymore. He was asserting.
Like this was still within his power if he pushed hard enough.
I took out my phone. Not dramatically, not to threaten him. Just enough for him to see what I was doing. If you keep contacting me, I said, I'm going to the police. That stopped him cold. For a second, his whole face emptied. Then he gave a short, unbelieving laugh. Seriously?
Yes.
Elena, come on. No, listen carefully. My voice was very steady now.
You do not get to keep inserting yourself into my life because you regret what you did. You do not get to decide that my boundaries are temporary because they inconvenience you. If you contact me again, I will treat it like harassment.
He stared at me as if I had become someone he didn't recognize. Maybe I had.
Maybe the woman he knew would have still been reachable through guilt, through history, through the memory of being loved.
That woman was gone. His face hardened. You're overreacting. The words barely surprised me anymore. I slipped my phone back into my bag. And you still don't understand the difference between hearing no and accepting it. Then I walked away. This time he didn't follow. But when I got home that night, there was another email waiting. No subject line. Just one sentence in the preview. I can't believe you're doing this to me.
I sat at my kitchen table and looked at those words until something inside me settled into place with terrible clarity.
That was the center of him. Not what he had done. Not what I had felt. Not what his choices had set in motion. Just his shock that I was enforcing consequences he never imagined would apply to him. I opened a folder on my laptop.
And I started organizing everything. Once I started organizing it, I couldn't stop.
Screenshots of unknown numbers, the blocked email addresses, the flowers at my office, the message requests,
the date he appeared at my building, the date his mother called, the date he waited outside my job. Every contact point lined up in a neat, ugly sequence that looked far more serious on paper than it had inside the haze of living through it. That's one of the cruelest parts of situations like this.
While you're inside them, each incident arrives separately. A text, a surprise appearance, an email, a call, one thing at a time. Small enough for someone else to dismiss. Small enough for you to second guess your own instincts if you're not careful. But laid side by side, the pattern tells the truth. And the truth was simple. Ethan was not trying to apologize. He was trying to get access back. The next morning, I called a lawyer. Not because I was dramatic, not because I thought I was starring in some Lifetime movie version of my own life, because I needed to know, concretely, where the line was between discomfort and danger, between someone being emotionally messy and someone refusing to stop. The woman I spoke to was calm, practical, and completely unimpressed by my instinct to minimize what had been happening. When I told her I wasn't sure whether I was overreacting, she interrupted me gently. "Do you want him contacting you?" "No." "Have you made that clear?" "Yes." "Has he continued anyway?" "Yes." She paused. "Then stop negotiating with yourself." Something in my chest loosened when she said that, because that had been the quiet battle underneath everything else. Not just dealing with Ethan, dealing with the voice all women are taught to develop early. The one that says maybe you're reading too much into it, maybe he's just hurting, maybe this is uncomfortable but not serious enough yet, maybe you should wait for it to become undeniably bad before you act. But by the time something becomes undeniable, it has often already gone too far. The lawyer told me to keep documenting everything, told me to reply to nothing, told me that if he contacted me again or showed up anywhere in person, I needed to file immediately. So I did what she said, and for 6 days nothing happened. No calls, no emails, no flowers, no strange accounts. The silence should have felt reassuring. Instead, it felt like weather, the kind that changes pressure before a storm. By the 7th night, I had dinner plans with a man named Daniel. He wasn't important in the grand romantic sense, not yet. He was someone I had met through a friend from work, someone kind and observant and refreshingly straightforward. He knew I had been through a bad breakup. He didn't pry. He didn't perform sensitivity. He just asked if I wanted to get dinner and made it sound simple. So I said yes. The restaurant was small, warm, and dim, in that expensive way places try to look effortless. Nothing flashy. Just candlelight, low conversation, polished glasses, and the smell of butter and rosemary in the air. I remember thinking, as I sat across from Daniel listening to him tell me a story about getting lost on a hiking trail in college, that this was the first evening in months I had spent entirely inside my own life again. No scanning the room, no checking the door, no thinking about Ethan. Just dinner, just laughter, just the fragile beginning of normal. Then Daniel's expression changed. He glanced past my shoulder and the warmth in his face went still. I turned and saw Ethan standing near the hostess stand. For one suspended second, nothing moved. My whole body locked. Not because I loved him, because fear and fury hit at the exact same time. He had no reason to be there. This was not one of the bars he used to go to, not a neighborhood we shared, not a place we had ever come together. He wasn't scanning the room like someone who had wandered in by chance and recognized a familiar face. He was looking directly at me. Daniel lowered his menu. "Do you know him?" I didn't take my eyes off Ethan. Yes. That one word carried so much more than explanation ever could. Because in that moment, I knew. This was not persistence. This was not romance. This was surveillance wearing heartbreak as a disguise. Ethan started walking toward the table. I stood up before he reached us. "What are you doing here?" Several nearby conversations dropped in volume. Not silent, just thinner, alert. His eyes flicked once toward Daniel, then back to me. "I need to talk to you." "No." "Elena." "No." My voice came out sharper now. "You need to leave." He looked at Daniel again, taking him in with the quick, ugly calculation of someone suddenly forced to confront the fact that time had moved forward without his permission. "So this is what this is?" he asked. Daniel pushed his chair back slowly, not confrontational, just ready. I didn't answer Ethan's question because it did not deserve an answer. "You followed me here." "I didn't follow you," he snapped too fast. That was answer enough. Because innocent people don't deny the exact accusation they haven't fully been given yet. My pulse was hammering so hard I could feel it in my throat. "You need to leave right now," I said. His face tightened. "I've been trying to talk to you for weeks and now I have to find out like this." "Find out what?" "That you've already moved on. That after everything you're just out with some random guy like none of it mattered." The room around us had changed texture now. The hostess was frozen near the front. A server stood 2 steps away pretending not to watch. Daniel was on his feet beside me, saying nothing, which somehow made his presence feel steadier. And Ethan still somehow believed he was the injured one. I laughed once, sharply, out of pure disbelief. You told me you wanted to explore your options. That's not the same thing.
No, I said. Then explain it to me. His voice dropped, tense and urgent. I thought you'd need time. I thought after everything we had, you wouldn't just...
He stopped, but it was too late.
The sentence had already exposed him.
I thought you'd need time, not to heal, to wait.
Daniel looked at me then, and in his face I saw the exact moment an outsider understood the shape of the situation. Not just ex-boyfriend drama, not just awkward overlap, something worse, something rooted in ownership.
Ethan must have seen it too, because his tone changed. Elena, please, can we just talk outside? No, you're making a scene. That almost made me smile.
He had followed me to a restaurant and approached my table during a date.
And I was making a scene.
I reached into my bag, pulled out my phone, and held it up where he could see it.
This is the last time I'm saying it. Leave. For the first time, uncertainty flashed through him. Not remorse. Not shame. Just the dawning recognition that the audience around us was not interpreting this the way he wanted.
You'd really do that? He asked quietly.
I stared at him.
You came here.
A manager appeared then, professional and firm, asking if there was a problem.
Yes, I said without hesitation. There is.
That did it?
Because once someone else named the situation, Ethan lost control of the frame. He couldn't make this a private misunderstanding anymore. Couldn't soften it into unfinished business between two people who still cared about each other. Now he was just a man who had shown up uninvited to confront a woman during dinner. His face went hard in that instant. All the softness vanished. The regret, the pleading, the wounded voice. What was left underneath it was far colder.
This is unbelievable, he said.
No, I replied. This is consequences. The manager asked him to leave. He looked at me for one long second, jaw tight, eyes bright, with something that was no longer heartbreak and not yet rage, then turned and walked out without another word.
My knees started shaking the second the door closed behind him.
Daniel touched my elbow lightly. Do you want to get out of here?
I almost said no out of habit, out of embarrassment, out of that old reflex women are trained into, where you minimize your own fear so no one has to deal with it.
But I was done doing that.
Yes, I said.
Outside, the air was cold enough to sting. Daniel walked me to my car and waited until I got in. He didn't ask for details, didn't push, just said, whatever that is, it's not normal.
I nodded once. I know. That night, I sent everything to the lawyer.
The restaurant incident, the timeline, the screenshots, the building, the office, the calls, the flowers, the unknown accounts. The email that said, I can't believe you're doing this to me, as if my refusal to surrender access was the real injury in the story.
By morning, paperwork had started. Filing was both simpler and uglier than I expected.
There was no grand music, no satisfying moment of triumph, just forms, dates, attachments, statements, the deeply unglamorous machinery of proving that a boundary had been crossed enough times to become legible to the system. I took a personal day from work and sat at my dining table with my laptop open, my coffee gone cold, and my entire private life arranged into evidence. At one point, I found myself staring at a screenshot of his first message after the breakup. You're overreacting. Let's talk tomorrow when you've calmed down. I remember thinking how perfectly that one sentence contained everything that came after. The dismissal, the presumption, the certainty that he would set the pace, define the problem, and decide when I became reasonable again.
That was the blueprint.
Everything after that was just escalation. The temporary order was granted faster than I expected. When the call came, I sat very still and listened to the clerk explain the next steps in a voice so matter-of-fact it almost calmed me. A hearing date, service, what to bring, what to expect. I wrote everything down twice.
Then I hung up and cried. Not because I regretted it. Because there is grief in being forced to defend yourself against someone you once loved.
People talk about heartbreak like it's only sorrow.
Sometimes it's paperwork.
Sometimes it's changing your routines and checking locks and teaching your nervous system new rules for what safety means now. Sometimes it's hearing your own voice describe the person you once imagined a future with and realizing that future is so dead it has become evidence. The hearing was 2 weeks later. Ethan came with his mother.
Of course he did.
Diane sat beside him in a navy blouse and a face arranged into disapproval, the expression of a woman who still believed this entire situation had happened to her son rather than because of him. Ethan looked pale, less polished. The confidence was still there, but thinner now, stretched tight over something unraveling.
When my name was called, I stood. And for the first time in months, I felt no urge to explain myself emotionally, no need to be understood in some soft human way. I only wanted to be clear. That, more than anything, was what he had never anticipated. He had expected pain, maybe anger, maybe even threats. What he had not expected was discipline. The judge asked questions, I answered them. Had I made it clear that contact was unwanted? Yes. Had he continued contacting me through alternate numbers, email addresses, indirect channels, and in-person appearances? Yes. Did I feel intimidated by his continued attempts to reach me after repeated refusals? Yes. Did I believe the contact would continue if the court did not intervene? Yes. Simple questions, simple answers. And then Ethan was given room to speak. He started the way men like him always do, when consequences finally corner them. Calm voice, careful tone, wounded posture. He said he had made a mistake, said emotions had been high, said he had only wanted a chance to talk, to explain himself, to repair something meaningful. Said I had misread his intentions, said he never meant to frighten me. The judge listened, then asked the only question that mattered. If Ms. Brooks made it clear she did not want further contact, why did you continue contacting her? Ethan hesitated, and in that hesitation I saw it, that tiny flicker where truth and self-protection wrestle for control. Then he said, because I knew she didn't really mean it. The silence after that felt physical. He seemed to realize what he'd said only after it was already hanging in the air. I didn't move, didn't react, but inside me something settled for good. Because there it was, not confusion, not love, not remorse. Entitlement, plain and unvarnished. He believed my no was negotiable because it was inconvenient to him. He believed his history with me gave him interpretive power over my boundaries. He believed access was still his unless he personally agreed to lose it. That was always the center of it. The judge's expression changed almost imperceptibly, but enough. Enough. The order was granted. Afterward, outside the courtroom, Diane caught up with me near the exit. This is cruel, she said in a sharp whisper. He made a mistake, and you've humiliated him. I turned and looked at her. For months, that word had been following me around like a script they all shared. Mistake. As if betrayal becomes smaller when you rename it. As if disregard becomes forgivable when you make it sound accidental. No, I said. He made a choice. Her mouth tightened. He loved you. I held her gaze. Then he should have known how to hear no. And I walked away. The last thing I heard before the doors closed behind me was Ethan calling my name. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just once. Like even then, after the paperwork, the hearing, the order, the public unraveling of every story he had told himself about what he still meant to me, some part of him believed I might turn around if he said my name the right way. I didn't, and that was the real end of it. Not the order, not the courtroom, not his mother's anger, not even the fear. The end was the moment I understood, completely and without softness, that what broke us was never his curiosity about other women. It was his certainty that I would still be there after it, that I would remain available, reachable, waiting, that my love had made me permanent. He was wrong. And when he finally understood that, it was already too late.